Alright, so I did forget to show you something for testing bad solder joints, and I showed you how to test, come on, there we go, connectivity. Make sure you had a good solder joint. This is how you tell if you have a bad solder joint. So set for connectivity, and now we're going across here, and it is connected. But the solder joint is not very good. So if we switch back to resistance, which is just the ohms, that dealy, and go across a good solder joint, we get point something ohms. But if we go across a bad solder joint, 0.8. I was getting 1.0 earlier, but that's kind of indicative of the bad solder joint. There was a 1.3. Yeah. So that'll tell you that you've got a bad solder joint, and if you want, you can just go, I mean, we'll take this entire row and check it right now. Touch here, and our resistance is 0 ohms, 0.0. But if I go up here to that connection point that goes across the bad solder joint, look at that, 2 point something. And reducing as I put pressure on it. But you can check that. Yeah, that's the weird thing about this solder joint. I was trying to make a bad solder joint and just couldn't. I guess I guess enough practice just kind of killed the technique of making bad solder joints, because I could only make bad solder joints at one point, and now I can't seem to make them even when I try. Maybe a larger element that cools more or heats more slowly. But that's kind of how you check for that in case you run into that issue. And we can look up here and connect all the way across this row and get 0.4, 0.2. 0.2 is generally what I see, 0.2 ohms. But it will tell you that that solder joint is bad. And when that does happen, all you got to do is touch it up, maybe clean the iron, or in some cases, wipe your iron out. Cut a hole in your sponge. It helps a lot. And then just desolder the points and kind of scrape the solder off. Because if it's got stuff on it, oils and gunk, flux, and it'll just look terrible, and you won't be able to get a good connection. And then put it right over it again. Ta-da! Very strong. And that is another indicator of a good solder joint is so pretty hefty. That was a pretty weak one, and it still held because it was a good bond. So that's the other part of testing.